2023 meeting of CDTC Planning Committee, Groundhog Day, I guess. Our first item is introductions, right? Steve Bean, Schenectady County.
Bob Rice, New York State DOT.
Tom Richardson, the city of Mechanical.
Liz Cornwell's Village of Bolton Spa.
Chris Mullen, City of Schenectady.
John Scalwell, town of Clifton Park.
Patrick Jordan, Port of Albany.
Ross Farrell, CDTA.
Tom Village of Holland.
Josie Graves, City of Cohoes.
Andrew Kreshik, City of Troy.
Connor Haskin, Albany County Airport Authority.
Tony Kennedy, Town of Glenville.
Sandy Misowitz, Capital District Transportation Committee.
Chris Bauer, CDTC staff.
Lisa Raimondo, Albany County.
Peter Comenza, town auditor.
Lorenzo Stefano, nice time.
Aaron Simon, CDTC staff.
Terry Ward, CDTC. And Palmer, CDTC. Megan Quirk, CDTA. Melissa Shanley, CDTA. Rebecca Odell, CDTC. Teresa Wilson, CDTC.
Mohammed Ibrahim, CDTC.
Andrew Tracy, CDTC.
Jacob Beeman, CDTC.
Anna Felton, Johnny Greenbush. Nicole McGrath, FHWA.
All right, everybody.
Okay,
Visitors issues, anybody? You're gonna go up here?
let me just rattle off who we have listening remotely. We have Stephen Maples from CDTC. Addison Lyons from AECOM, Brian Healy, CHA, Chris Heat from McFarland Johnson, Katura, is that you from City of Rensselaer? We'll assume so unless you hear otherwise. David Miller from Foursquare ITP, Jamie O'Neill, Tom Malta, Joe Semino, CHA, I believe. Caitlin Meyer, and I apologize, I just butchered your name, from Town of Colony. Kathleen Bell from EPA Region 2, Kelly Kircher from DOT, Laura Robinson, Town of Niskuna, Pat Curran, Albany County, Ryan Riper, Town of Wilton, and Stephen Goldberg, the City of Waterloo. Golding, I apologize. Bad eyes.
Visitors issues, anybody sign up or anybody have any issues? Before we move on. That's a totally different question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
Everybody has
We have a
issues.
presentation today,
We do.
Foursquare ITP.
I'm gonna turn it over to Chris Bauer to do the introduction.
Great, so hello, everybody. Today we're going to present a summary of the final report of the bus lane feasibility study, which represents completion of a CDTC regional planning study that was part of our transit planning program. And just really wanted to express our appreciation to our partners, including CDTA, City of Albany, City of Troy, City of Schenectady, and all the others who participated in developing this regional effort. I'm not going to steal anyone else's thunder, but the study looked at this feasibility of bus lanes, but also other transit supportive infrastructure. It was a really great planning process. It was a great model for public and stakeholder outreach, and it's a good product that I urge you to check out at busLaneStudy.com. And so without stealing anyone else's thunder, I'm just going to quickly turn it over to Ross Farrell from CDTA.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks to Chaim and Sandy and CDTC for undertaking the study. This was a really good example of why you do a planning process. It gave us a good direction as to what's going to be feasible for us to implement over the years to not just upgrade our BRT lines, but upgrade all of our service throughout the region. And as David will go into, it's called bus lane feasibility study. What's going to come out of it, or what came out of the study, is more of a look at how we're going to do bus priority on select corridors. So although CDTA would love to have bus lanes, miles and miles of bus lanes traveling through the entire region, especially in downtown Albany, where we have the most amount of service, if that's not going to be possible, there's a lot of other tools in the toolbox that we can use, that we've already used, such as queue jumpers and transit signal priority, but use more of them to prioritize transit throughout the region. And so with that, David, I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Ross and Chris, and good morning, everybody. I'm David Miller with Foursquare ITP. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and a Senior Project Manager, and I was the project manager for our team on this study. We had a local firm, MJ Engineering, as sub-consultant, as well as Arcadis IBI Group, helping us with some of the detailed analysis of the corridors. I have a lot of slides and Sandy's given me a strict time limit, so I'm going to go rapidly through them, and then we'll have some time for questions and discussions at the end as necessary. So just real quick, I'm just going to give a quick project recap, not go through everything in detail. I'm going to hit specifically on the public engagement process and results, and then the final recommendations. But everything else is on the website, tech memos and reports and all the detail if you would like to dive in. And I saw a lot of familiar faces on the OWL camera, and appreciate all the stakeholders who participated in the process, and were a great part of the team in moving this forward. So as a recap, we started with research. That was our task 2, looking at all the previous studies you've done, and then doing kind of a deep dive into peer literature and peer results from across the country, in terms of mostly focused on bus lanes at that point. And that really supported the whole study, having that background. We then identified the potential corridors across the region. We screened them, we evaluated them, we ranked them. That was using primarily transit performance and market demographic analysis data. Then in task 4, we really got into the details of the transit operations. We did field work. We talked with the jurisdictional staff and did walk the corridors with them, and really went through an iterative process to kind of refine what would work on each of the selected corridors. Throughout the process, we had a stakeholder advisory committee. We talked to leadership of the supporting agencies and the local jurisdictions, and had a very robust public engagement process as well that went out at key times to get input. And then that all led to the final report, which we posted on the website in mid-November for public comment. So early in the process, we did a survey. We went out, we did 5 pop-up events, 2 webinars, press releases, email, social media, and used the MetroQuest platform, which is a very interactive survey software, to ask people about their experience, about their travel behavior, but also about their preferences with how we use our physical space and our transportation environment, and also gave them the opportunity to go through a mapping exercise and give us input in a more interactive way, where they could drop pins on the map and tell us what problems they were experiencing where. We had over 830 respondents, pretty well geographically distributed across the region, obviously more from the denser areas. Some key findings were, when Troy sent an email, and when the mayor of Albany sent out an Instagram post, our number of respondents really ticked up. And when we looked at the demographics of the respondents versus the region as a whole, it very closely matched. So we were very happy with those results. With the mapping exercise, we let people drop pins for these five different categories: where buses experience congestion, where they have intersection problems, if there's unsafe conditions, where bus stops need improvement, where there are ADA access problems. So we were getting at bus priority, but we were also getting some other information that just provides some general value to CDTA and the local jurisdictions for improving conditions for all types of users. And this is kind of just a sneak peek of the results. We did a heat map of where we were kind of seeing some of the key, the density of responses, where people were saying there was congestion for different reasons. Could be cars, could be bus congestion, could be school stuff, freeway on and off in the peak periods. So slow buses and congestion issue was the number one pin dropped in this exercise, and that was really helpful for us to understand where the service was experiencing issues. So when we asked people, just how do you feel about the bus service and the speed and reliability of it, about a third of them felt that it was frequently stuck in congestion. When we did a trade-off exercise and asked about how we should use our space, roadway space, intersections, green time, the amount of signal green time, about 2/3 pretty consistently said, yes, you should give buses more green time. Yes, you should give them priority infrastructure. And yes, you should remove or restrict parking to provide space for bus lanes. So this was all theoretical. At this point, we weren't showing them actually where or what we were going to do, but it was a good indication of the folks who took the survey, at least, that they were, generally supportive of bus priority treatments in the future. So, then we did our work with the jurisdictions to come up with some comments, and we took that out to back to the public. We used SurveyMonkey, and we had them rank different types of improvements. It could be pedestrian, bike, bus, or just continue to prioritize personal vehicles. And they had a little, as you can see here, a little drop down where they could actually rank 1, 2, 3, 4 for each of those. And then we actually showed them concepts of what that could look like, which I'll show more of later. It wasn't intended to be like, here's the design. It was, here's an example of how a particular street could reallocate the space for bikes or buses, or leave it as it was. We still asked the demographic questions and about their experience. And we had even more respondents than before. We got up to close to 1,000. We still had a good geographic distribution. We used Facebook and Instagram advertisements to boost the survey and to promote it. This took place in the summer, and CDTC was also doing some other engagement and promotion at that time. And of course, people are traveling. So we were very happy that we were able to get that level of involvement, despite people being just, generally distracted with life. And one of the key questions that CDTC and CDTA wanted us to ask was just in general about queue jumps, because, it's kind of a low hanging fruit. It's relatively inexpensive and easier to implement, but can provide quite a bit of benefit to buses, which are often experiencing the most delay at intersections and not necessarily in the mid-block. So we asked a very specific question about if you would support the expansion of queue jumps throughout the region. And in total, 85% of people said yes, 65% said definitely, and 20% said probably. So that was very encouraging that, even if through further study, we may find out we can't get bus lanes in some places, we did at least understand that there's broad support for queue jump as a strategy to improve bus performance. So for every corridor we asked, again, should we prioritize pedestrians, bikes, bus, or cars? And every single place, and they're all very different, pedestrians were number one, which is good, because if you can't safely get to and from the bus, then it doesn't matter how fast or reliable it is, right? As I mentioned, queue jumps were overwhelmingly supported. When we look at the 4 individual corridors, in general, bus priority was scored highest. In some cases, in most cases, bike priority or bike infrastructure was second. In some cases, bus and bike were tied for second. And in every case, using the space, continuing to use the space only for cars was ranked dead last. So this was, a good indication that bus priority is supported, but also that there is very strong support for improving the active transportation environment in these corridors as well for pedestrians and bicyclists. When we went to the leadership of the 3 jurisdictions and we showed them these concepts and talked about the trade-offs, what we heard was, Schenectady is open to queue jumps, open to piloting bus lanes. Troy was open to more on the kind of the queue jumps and the bike facilities side. Albany, particularly on Washington, wanted to focus on queue jumps and bike facilities in that particular corridor. The corridor in Albany also uses State Street and a piece of Broadway, so there might be some other opportunities there. But the mayor was very focused on bike improvements. We're very supportive of queue jumps as well. So very positive response from jurisdictional leadership through this process. So to get quickly into the recommendations, as Ross alluded to, this is called a bus lane study, but what it turned into was, a people priority study where it's, we kind of found that the support is for multimodal improvements in all these corridors and focusing on safety and moving people and not necessarily a specific mode. And so coming out of it, the recommendation is really that, the agencies and the CDTA should work together to pursue multimodal improvements to improve the comfort of all of the users while also improving the performance of the bus through the deployment of different tactical strategies that are very context specific. And in that way, the experience will be improved for all the users of the corridor. And we did create a bus and bike priority toolbox as part of this process, which we hope will be useful in the future for anyone who wants to use it in the region, not just CDTA. And, there's a lot of information, a lot of different strategies in there that can be applied, block by block, intersection by intersection. There's no one size fits all type of improvement. And so I think as the region moves forward, that will probably be the path that makes the most sense and gains the most traction, is really looking at what different specific treatments can work where and then moving those forward. So to show where we ended up, these concepts again are just examples. They're not final design, but they give they give some indication of what things could look like. So in Troy, at the intersection, you might have a curbside queue jump and a bike lane, and then mid-block bike lanes. There could be a long queue jump from Green Island Bridge southbound to the old Uncle Sam Transit Center. In Schenectady, CDTA is analyzing queue jumps and potentially bus lanes, but that was one of the places where pedestrian safety was the #1 ranked priority by people. So again, this will be part of a suite of multimodal improvements. In Albany, on Washington Street and Broadway, again, pedestrian improvements, bike lanes, queue jumps, tactical bus lanes. You can have, kind of a long bus stop. You could have a bus lane that's 2 blocks just to get you through a specific issue. And so this corridor, the treatment is going to vary quite a bit, but that's okay, because the issue with bus performance varies from block to block in this corridor. So it makes sense for the priority treatments to adjust with that. On Central Avenue, the city is pursuing a road diet. So you could certainly do queue jumps as part of a road diet. You could have parking protected bike lanes. What we found is that the buses aren't really experiencing congestion in the mid-block. The road is very wide. People are using the lanes in a wide manner of ways. That's usually not safe for other users. And so we think with queue jumps and as part of that road diet, we could really help the buses and also make a safer, more inviting environment for all users. And what we ended up with in terms of kind of the external messaging was this smart corridors concept, where we show the 4 corridors across the region. We talk about the potential benefits here on the left, and we provide some example illustrations and renderings. These are taken from that toolbox. And there is a specific map for each corridor where these renderings on the right change a little bit depending on what the jurisdictions were comfortable moving forward with. And that's all on the website as well. So we put out the draft final report for comments. We publicized it as we had before with press releases, social media, really, and advertising on Facebook, 3 rounds of advertising on Facebook and Instagram. And we got 35 comments in total. 14 of those were positive and highly supportive. There are 3 examples here. where people were gung ho and very appreciative of the study and really wanted it to be implemented as quickly as possible. We had 17, which I call constructive, where they weren't negative. They were positive towards the study, but they felt that there should be more bus lanes, or that queue jumps don't go far enough, or that the system isn't the network we presented wasn't aggressive enough. Also, people just saying, I want more bus service in more places. If you're going to do this, you really need to enforce parking. So those weren't negative, but they were sort of positive, but with a tone of, please do more, or make some adjustments to enhance what you've presented. There were only 4 that were negative. And generally they all essentially said the same thing, which was, I already sit in traffic and this will make my commute worse, or make traffic worse. But that was the minority of comments. So we understand that this is a beginning. This is laying a foundation. There will be the need for additional study. There will be parking studies to understand the use and the occupancy by time of day, how we're going to use the curb at different times of day, further traffic analysis to really get into the details of how some of these improvements would impact intersection operations and how those might need to be adjusted. A deeper dive into some of the transit operations and what moving stops and putting queue jumps in would do, what benefits we could expect. Obviously, the geometric design, and then also thinking about that holistic environment, the streetscape multimodal, thinking about the curbs and the intersections and crosswalks and how and the bike lanes and how that would all work together with new transit priority. So I will stop there. As Chris mentioned, all the information, detailed reports, appendices are at buslanestudy.com, and I'll stop there and we'll take questions. And I hope that wasn't too long.
Thank you, David. That was great. Any questions?
I had a comment, I guess, more, I was working on the study with David and Ross and the team. And the one thing that I pointed out there that I wanted to point out to the room is it's a great study and we're making progress with things, but this is the Route 5 corridor in specific. It has different segments, even if we don't, and those segments kind of reflect the era in which we live. So, if you go into Colony, you've got 4 lanes, a center turn lane, speeds 45, into Niskuna, you get into Schenectady, people around this table had a similar talk. And they took that road and they prioritized pedestrian safety, on-street parking, and reducing travel lanes. And so a large segment of this study area is widely different than the rest of it. Now, the section that we were talking about for bus lanes in the city is McClellan Street to Knott and Veeder, which is still the old way of essentially 4 lanes, which would be applicable to do something like this. But what I get a little nervous about is that Route 5, if we just focus on that in the city in a whole, it tends to look like broken up via what the appetite was at the time. I would love if we had more money to go back and make the Schenectady Route 5 corridor, the corridor of the whole, look uniform. Because I think that's what we're all trying to have is a uniform corridor. But if you were driving and we were to implement this, you would visibly see when you hit McClellan Street, oh, what changed here? Something changed here where all of a sudden we said less than 20 years ago, cars and people and reducing crossings and all these things, they were important. And now this is important. And you're going to see it like that. You're going to go from Colony to Schenectady, and then you go to downtown, and downtown looks different than the previous segment. So I don't know if there's a way we could do it. We probably can do anything with money, but you're going to see that. I think that's especially in Schenectady. I'm not as familiar with Albany, how the segments work, but it's just something interesting that I notice when I drive State Street, because we get a lot of complaints about what was done on the 890 Fair Avenue up because it's so narrow and so tight. And, the idea was reducing the crossings, and this is going to be, it's going to be good. It's more multimodal. We don't have bike lanes. It wasn't even, I don't know, a factor on State Street before. So it's just a thought that, how do we get, I would love to see this actually go up in certain areas we pick away, kind of like our red line looking at Woodlawn. If we can make that area and then the St. Luke's area, it's kind of resemble it. So it doesn't feel like 2 administrations essentially that did 2 different projects.
Chris makes a really good point that the corridor, well, in the city of Schenectady is significantly different block to block. But in the city of Albany and on DOT section, in the town and the village. I think this is why we couldn't just say, well, let's put in 3 miles of bus only lanes. Because we have to adapt to each section and the priorities are definitely different by each area. And what Chris is also bringing up is the fact that we all have to admit is what was good about this study is any sort of pushback to any concept of bus priority wasn't based on, well, you're getting rid of potentially parking or you're getting rid of a travel lane. Obviously, there's a little bit of that. It was more of the fact of, well, if there is roadway space to get rid of, right, or to reduce, couldn't we put in bike lanes? Couldn't we put in a shorter pedestrian crossing? And that's a very valid discussion to have. And that's why whatever we do is you may see 2 blocks of bus lanes because in those areas, it's the most vital connection and congested area for BRT. But what you might see in the rest of the corridor and other areas is a series of queue jumpers that incorporate improvements to the traffic signal for pedestrian crossings. Because whatever we end up doing, because this is something that would, be the implementation of it, CDTA would obviously be the primary funder of it. Whatever we end up touching, if it's an outdated traffic signal and we're putting in a queue jumper, you get a brand new traffic signal. And then with that is better operations even for vehicular traffic. So this overall discussion of like, how do you balance and how do you prioritize every mode? It's not car versus bus. It's bike, it's pedestrian, it's car, and it's bus. And how you balance each one is going to depend on each area of each city and literally go block by block. And we can't determine what that's going to look like until we do. And this is what David was talking about. The last step is doing a traffic study. So right now, actually in Schenectady, as part of the red line upgrades, we're doing a traffic study from all the way out in the border with Niskayuna into Veeder Knot to talk about sections of the roadway that Chris is talking about that wasn't even described as potential for bus lanes. But we might do something different and make some sort of improvement in like places like Woodlawn. So there's a lot of nuance to this one, but it's been great. And Chris and all the municipalities have been great to work with because it gave us much better direction as to what we do next.
And with the focus on that corridor in Schenectady, if you've driven Schenectady, you'll see that area, Veeder to McClellan, is the last area that the city has made what I would call a capital investment into the upgrade of the street. And it was a focus now that we are getting the state touring route money, that we put some of that money into there. However, we're working with CDTA and everyone, okay, if we're going to make a significant capital investment into here, can CDTA be a partner in that investment? What does the investment look like so that we're working as the one team and we don't do something just to redo it for something else? Because once again, it's just noticeable. You can tell where a federal aid project starts and where a federal aid project ends when you're on Route 5. And I don't know if it's coincidentally or not, but that area is also one of our environmental justice areas. When you get into the Vale neighborhood, Hamilton Hill neighborhood, all of a sudden it looks like, where is the investment in the Route 5? And we want to do it, but we want to do it in coordination with the recommendations of the studies.
And Randy's not here, but Central Avenue, right? Central Avenue, as you all know, we chose as part of the TIP to do a road diet project for that. So obviously CDTA is not going to put in a bunch of queue jumpers and then later a road diet happens, CDTA puts some queue jumpers. Basically that becomes one partner project between CDTA and the city of Albany to implement improvements for all modes.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Ross. I need to get moving.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, administration, previous meeting minutes of January 4th. Any comments? Can I have a motion to approve? Motion. Do I get a second? No comments, Michael?
No.
I didn't know.
All right, ready to vote? All those in favor, aye? When opposed, abstained, motion carries. Tip, fiscal constraint.
Yes.
Jacob?
I'm trying to get to the right place. So that's a. Oh boy, somebody changed the settings on me in here. Don't change my settings, people. Stephen, can you confirm that you're seeing the slides virtually?
Yes, we are seeing those.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so in January, we presented the fiscal constraint table as of the approved 22-27 tip. So since then, we've made quite a few changes, but we are still within fiscal constraint. In the first year, we are under programmed by 4%. Second year, over programmed by 5% though. And then in total, we are still under programmed for the 4-year SIP period by 2%. However, to get there, we go to the next slide. We had to make quite a few budget adjustments for February. Really, this is because kind of since October 1, we had made quite a few amendments and project selection changes to the 1924 tip. So all of those changes were never really rolled into the new tip during the review period. So we had about 24 million of new project roll-in that was added to the 4-year SIP period. And then another 42 million of new projects that were added, and that was mostly in CMAQ and the FDA fund sources. So we are still within our fiscal constraint, but we had just wanted to document all of these budget adjustments that we had to make. So we'll probably continue doing this each month. If we have new roll-ins or new fund sources that get added, we have to make changes to the budget adjustments. We'll document them in this way going forward. So any questions? I mean, we can if we want to. Going forward, we could do that if we, a budget adjustment. Approve the budget adjustment.
Yeah, there's a large number of budget adjustments here, so it probably would be wise to.
So you look for a motion to approve the budget adjustments associated with the fiscal constraint.
Keep it in fiscal constraint.
Okay, can we get a motion to that? Andrew?
Andrew and Chris.
Second, Chris. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Anyone opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, we're into tip amendments. First one, what, S-265? S-285 is just the combination of pins.
Tony's going to talk about first one.
Yeah, so this is, we've got two separate big projects. Running from Dutch Meadows Lane to Freeman Bridge. And we just wanted to combine both the projects into one so that, we can be really one project. Pretty simple.
No issues, no issues. Any questions for Tony?
It'll be one pin, right?
One, correct.
No cost change.
Any schedule change? Just
This actually might help move the schedule forward. Because we'll have to do down at the same time.
all right, then we're looking for a motion to approve tip amendment for S-265 and S-285 to combine into one pin. Can I get a motion to that effect?
Motion.
Andrew, can I get a second? Second, Mike, any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Second amendment A-604 and A-628. Do we have Don or somebody on the line? Anybody?
Don, are you, I don't think Don is listening in, Jacob, can you speak to it?
Okay.
If no one's going to comment on. So this actually same situation as the last amendment. This is just combining two Town of Guilderland sidewalk projects into one for ease of implementation. No additional funding added. And I believe the schedule stayed all the same. So combining two pins in one.
Okay. Any questions? Can I have a motion to combine A 604 and A 628 into one project 10? Get a motion. Chris, second? Second. Joe? Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, aye? Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Third one, R 339,
That's correct.
New York 2 corridor, Congress and Ferry Street, and R 353, City of Troy. This is
Mr. Christian.
Andrew.
Yes,
All right, what are we doing?
almost want to table this until we do Bridge New York funding. We're consolidating, just like the others. The R 339 was essentially a mill and fill with sidewalk improvements and looking at traffic calming for a corridor between the Congress Street Bridge and 11th Street in the city. The funding for the reorientation of the slipways coming off the bridge or onto the bridge from River Street recently was funded, and as a result, being in the same corridor and being a component of any kind of improvements to be done, it's essentially an overlap. So we'd like to combine those projects into a single pendant.
Schedule change, no?
The schedule change would push out the mill and fill element a bit, and we're looking at maximizing the construction push out to accommodate the funding, the numbers. In the event that anything does get pushed up, we have pending reconstruction and construction of the Taylor Apartments that would necessitate probably an earlier construction point for the intersection. But right now that's to be determined, so we can float it.
Andrew, why did you bring up Bridge New York? Is this the rehabilitation of bridges?
Well, the other component of this corridor, which is the sore thumb, is the Sage Tunnel. And we have to consider that in the reconstruction of the traditional intersection, as well as being in this corridor for traffic. We know issue with it, and there has been for quite some time relative to maintenance. We've been looking at options for it, but heretofore it's been a component of the corridor, but the dollars for the construction have not been available. So as part of the design and the contemplation of forward progress within this corridor, we were going to incorporate that into our considerations, but we'd have to wait to get funding to actually, put a shovel in the ground relative to correcting this bridge, the tunnel. So seeing the results of the assessments for the Bridge New York submissions, the bridge under that supports First and Second Street, which is the Sage Tunnel, is a top candidate for funding. So ultimately, that's the third layer of the 3-layer cake that we're going to ultimately, hopefully, put upon the 2 previous items.
All right, so that would be another pin that you would add. That would be another project that down the road, one
Down the road.
Yeah.
Under the road.
So where it says bridge carrying, that's the tunnel.
Yes,
So the tunnel's classified as a bridge.
correct.
Okay. You went this. I've been through that tunnel like twice. I don't go over it.
Most people try to avoid it.
From our perspective here, I mean, to take this action today isn't going to impact
Right,
the ability
right.
to come back. Yeah.
All right,
Okay, just premature to.
gotcha. All right, any other questions, Andrew? Can I have a motion then to add R 339 and R 353, one project for City of Troy? Motion, Ross, can I get a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Vote, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Anyone opposed, abstained? There you go. Number
Thank you.
4, S 204 is the big one, right?
No.
S204. the CSX Bridge replacement, City of Schenectady. Chris,
I'd like a note on file that you're sullying the jury here. The Kings Road Bridge project is a project that was on the tip, I believe, in the nineties. It is one of the oldest projects that exists. I've done a lot of paperwork when I started in 2011 to keep it active on the tip. From preservation to beyond preservation to a lot of different things. And the project, as you see, was put on in 2015 with the budget there. We increased it via tip amendment because we widened it so that we could have bike shoulders on it, because there's no bike accommodations, as well as the sidewalk that is there. The sidewalk connects from the city of Schenectady to Rotterdam, and it's going to connect to a county sidewalk
project we just completed.
that was just completed on Hybrid Road. But I purposely put this little background in there for the dates, and up there is that we're talking about from 2015 to 2019, and costs have increased from 2019 to today, which is in 2023 dollars. And, you know, depending on what we're thinking now is supply chain, we're really not anticipating that this bridge, if we're lucky, get done this year. We're hoping that we can start in 2024. So those costs will also be factored. We have all of our right of way done. We have our Amtrak agreements. Hence kind of some of the delays is because we were negotiating all that during COVID. So we have a projection from the DOT, and pending this tip amendment, we are ready to let the project to replace the bridge. But we now have a funding shortage of near almost $2 million. So
Your engineering review with the railroad is complete. They're
Yes.
signed off on it.
Yep.
Congratulations.
That's we have, so that's why I put, we have the engineering review done, and we have the agreement for construction, support the flaggers. That's another thing is, you know, when we get the bid and we tell them what we're doing, we may have to get onto their schedule, which could only be 2024. So we have to get to that because we can't do anything without their control of the tracks.
I'd like to commend Chris for his persistence on this project. Having dealt with the railroad on a number of items, it's difficult to say the least. And the benefit that this project results for pedestrian use as well as infrastructure improvement, I'd support this effort.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
Motion it, and you have to describe the motion.
It's a motion to approve the cost increase for S204 of 1.9.
I'd like to say over 25%.
Cost increase over 29.
I'm just reading what it says here.
Is that your motion then, Andrew?
It is.
And Mike?
That was what I entirely had in mind.
Yeah, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? It's important project. All right, then vote. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed, staying, motion carries. Item 5, A625 and A295. Who's gonna explain this one?
You know, I can start. Essentially, we found out that the bridge was not on the federal aid system, so it required us to change fund sources. And after discussion with Albany County, they were amenable to swap instead of using the NHPP funds on the bridge, that it be used on the the 155 New Corner Road project. And it actually, in terms of fund source, it freed up the 2 million of urban that we just talked about, the increase on the Schenectady project. It actually balances it a little bit better, but essentially we're swapping fund sources between the two because the bridge isn't eligible, and we'll use the NHPP on Albany County's project.
It's a swap of funds, no budget implications.
Well, the budget covers the amendment, previous amendment, so motion to.
So can we have a motion to approve the change in funding? Second, that's a motion by Andrew, second by Joe. Any further discussion?
Just a quick question. This is Water Street down by state parking lots, Paris, okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
You ready to vote? All those in favor, aye? Anyone opposed, abstained, motion carries. Moving on to Bridge New York evaluation of results and programs.
Yes, so I'm going to let my friend here, Tracy, walk us through the Bridge New York applications. Get those in. Projecting for you. Stephen, can you confirm that you're seeing this?
Yes, we're seeing the presenter side though.
Oh. I knew somebody changed my settings. Hold on just a second. So one problem with this, doing this live, is if somebody changes something. Always messes it up. How about now?
And still on the presenter mode.
But now,
We're not in full screen, but we can see those slides.
okay, we're just gonna move forward then. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We received Bridge New York applications. They were due on January 6th. In total, 19 applications were received from 12 different local sponsors, county and municipal, in all 4 counties. So CDTC staff reviewed all 19 applications and evaluated them using the methodology that was approved by Planning Committee back in December. And we scored the projects and then ranked them within each county because NYSTA had established funding targets for each individual county, and these funding targets were also part of the Bridge New York guidance adopted by Planning Committee back in December. So I'm just going to run through the evaluation results now. If you'll advance to the next slide, we'll start with Albany County.
There we go.
Okay, in Albany County, we received 3 applications, all 3 of which were prepared by Albany County. The funding target that NYSTA established for this county was 2.49 million. And so as part of the recommended funding program, we recommend funding the top scoring bridge in this county, which was the replacement of CR 352 or Fox Creek. This bridge fits nicely into the funding target using almost all of the available funding for the county. And we weren't able to fund an additional bridge in Albany County without going well over the funding target. If you flip to the next slide, we received 10 applications from Rensselaer County. There they are.
Had a delayed reaction.
10 applications in Rensselaer County. Here they are ranked from the highest evaluation score at the top. If we funded only the top 3, we would fall short of the county's funding target, which was 6.82 million. So for this county, we recommend funding the top 4, which would include the city of Troy Bridge that Andrew was discussing earlier, as well as a bridge in city of Rensselaer, Rensselaer County, and town of Sand Lake as well. So to do so, we need to use some of the reserve funding that NYSTA was holding in reserve for the purpose of program balancing. And in order to do this, we'll need to use about $650,000 from the reserve so that we can fund 4 bridges in this county instead of 3. And we discussed this funding proposal with NYSTA, and they're okay with the reserve funding being used for this. If you go to the next slide, we have 5 applications from Saratoga County. The target here was 3.3 million. And we can fund the first 2 bridges in the town of Providence and then one that belongs to Saratoga County. If we use about $400,000 in reserve funding, we can fund the top 2 scoring bridges here. And finally, in Schenectady County, we received 1 application from the county themselves. And this can be funded if we use about $1.5 million from the reserve funding.
which is quite a lot, and we discussed this with NISTOT, and they approved the proposed funding scenario that we outlined, including the additional funding here for Schenectady County so that they can fund their bridge. And they said they have enough reserve funding to make this happen. So the funding summary is listed here along with the proposed funding by county. If you'd like to see the full evaluation results for each bridge, we did include that in the packet that was mailed out. So we would like to, I guess, put this forward as one recommended funding scenario for Bridge New York. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has about this.
Question. Just for the sponsors who submitted, other than the identified ones, there were a couple very close as far as the rating went. And priority wise for the submitters, I mean, is one that was left off something that is a higher priority for the sponsor than what was chosen? You know, if you look at the total scores, like the first one for Albany County,
Right.
the one that was dropped was only, I think, 2 points lower. Okay, yeah. So relative to Albany County's desire to progress one of these projects, is the one identified as the primary, the best one for now?
It does suit us.
Okay,
Thanks.
and that's just open to the other counties as well.
Chris, how come yours says one, you got one there and it's not out of the rank within the county?
That's just,
Team.
that's a vote. That's a-
Watch it, that's when Andrew started talking, I'm going, get down there, Molly. Hey.
That should be a one.
Extra 8.
Okay.
The 17 prior are rolled into this one. That's
Bob,
Bob.
this reserve funding, it's Bridge New York Fall.
Yeah, it's the same. The way it was laid out with the 8 counties, there was another just short of 3 million attached to it to sort of make everything balanced like that. And,
Okay.
I certainly apologize and to some of our consultant partners on the line. We were very specific that we wanted to follow the traditional process in here through this group and selecting candidates, and it made it different from some of the instructions. And I had some odd emails and phone calls, but that date doesn't say the same thing, but we were very purposeful that we wanted the selections to be, to Andrew's last point, I mean, just how we do it around the table for program update, so.
I didn't even go through the application. Did the application state that even though you had 1.5 million or 3.3, you could put in? I wouldn't have thought that, but did it state that you could do that, put in bigger applications like? Because there's a reserve?
Well, I think those were always intended there to be I don't, with the word floor or a target are sort of synonymous with one another. I think some of it was to temper the expectation. The last time we talked about this, that the effort involved to put 15 applications in when the level of funding that was there by each county. I think we were pleased with the way that it worked out and the response that we got. And I think we had conversations with most of the submitters already about these candidates.
I guess my thought, just because I've had the Kings Road and things of that, is that. Is there still reserve left if there is overages and things like that? Can you still get into the reserve? Or is the reserve?
I don't want to say it's like a lockbox with anything else, because go here forward. What's nice about these, it's not like last time Bridge New York was done, that was a different solicitation. There's no more money left in that solicitation. Now these are in the program. So just like we just put $2 more million on any of these come to the table. There is.
These aren't going to be held to the caps that the old bridges are.
That's the difference with the statewide solicitation. That's why it was so important to put these, sort of mainstream them into these are core programs now, even though they're Bridge New York versus a statewide solicitation.
So they could get STP urban, they could get other funds, they could get whatever they want.
Money swaps, whatever, these are. Okay. These are any other tip projects, right?
But also keep in mind that the funding behind these projects, only 2.5 years worth was included in this solicitation.
Sure.
So there's still another
round
likely to come.
Ideally, I'd like to see them for the next tip update.
Correct.
Just sort of disappear into that.
Exactly.
there's still some identity to these because they were part of the governor's announcement announcing the program here. So they're still gonna want to see lists. There's gonna be a press release at some point that these were the Bridge New York program. But for our business purposes, these are now core projects, just like anything else that's on the tip.
With that in mind, Chris was talking about, okay, if there's been, knowing that there is that other, the remaining solicitation. Does that mean monies that, can they be used towards shortages that are in these ones that we're approving today? Nah.
I'll get my crystal ball out.
Okay.
Check it out. I don't, like I said, I don't, it may just, our allocation a couple years from now may be higher to reflect the other 2.5 years,
Mhm.
or the powers that be may want to announce another Bridge New York program, and it could be similar to this. I don't know. Administratively, I'd like to see it just part of our core funding, but, you know, it may still exist, and they still may want to carve it out in some realm like this, but this is the important piece, that we're not dealing with caps the same way or timetables with it. I mean, these are now.
So a tip amendment for any of these would come through you. Through the department.
No, any of the sponsor, these are just people. Right?
Magic 8 Ball says ask again later.
Any additional questions for Bob? Then we're looking for a motion to approve staff recommendations for these 8 projects.
And release for public review.
And release for public review. It has to go to public review.
Yep, it's kind of a possibility.
All right, can I get a motion? Can I get a second? All right,
I forgot, I have one thing. Town of Providence, have they done a project before? They don't come to the meetings, correct?
Well, they have had projects through Saratoga County.
Is the county gonna?
I thought you'd have more of a concern about the one that's way up in the northwestern boundaries that you never hear from.
Where's that?
Hadley, up in that area.
Oh, I just wanted, like, that's a big project. I've never seen Town of Providence around the table,
It's
so I
been
didn't
through
know.
a county bridge.
County bridge.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
all right, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? Those in favor, aye. Anyone opposed, abstained? Motion carries. All right. Fiscal year 2023-24 UPWP, the project evaluation results and programming options. Is that you, Sandy?
I'll start it and then I'm gonna pass it to Jen.
Having a call.
Just what?
Having a call.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll wait for her to come back. But for Stephen, can you confirm that you're seeing the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So yeah, Jen will get into the details, but as you may recall, back in October, we issued a call for projects for planning studies and planning work for the upcoming fiscal year. And our fiscal year begins April 1st, runs through March 31st of 2024. We at the time thought we would have about $1 million available. That's sort of changed a little bit, as I mentioned at our prior meeting, where we had a budget adjustment. And we also have about $200,000 of consultant work that's not completed. That's similar to a TIP project. It's rolling in, so that's gonna kind of pare back this budget a little bit. And we received 15 projects proposals for consultant work. I would call them all in the tradition of our linkage planning work. We received 2 technical assistance proposals, one of which was withdrawn by the sponsor. And then we received 4 applications for bike skills training, for which there were 8 actual trainings requested. CDTC staff, there's Jen, CDTC staff screened the proposals, and I'll let Jen jump in from here. Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, hopefully I know where we're at here. Okay, so like Sandy said, we issued the solicitation, and of the proposals we received, we screened them all based on the primary criteria that was outlined in the solicitation materials. Yeah, I think you go to the next slide. So based on that criteria, this is how the project scored. And there's a more complete project list with project descriptions that was included in the meeting packet. But I'm sorry, I can't. So project scores started at 22 points down to 8 points. And that was based on the primary evaluation. Next slide. So then, based on, after we looked at that criteria, we then took a second look based on the secondary evaluation criteria that include the proposed project budget and whether or not it was reasonable or we thought could cover the project scope, the type of project, the sponsor's attendance at the UPWP workshop, geographic balance, making sure that we are investing throughout the region, the number of CDTC supported projects that have been awarded to that sponsor in the last 5 years, and then funds requested per capita of study area. So making sure that the investment is having the greatest impact. And these were secondary evaluation criteria, but also in the solicitation material. So based on that, we developed 3 programming options. This is the whole program option with the town of Milton, the village of Castleton on Hudson, village of Voorheesville, Albany County, town of Rotterdam, and town of Colony. This includes looking at the highest scored projects and consultant studies that have been funded in these areas in the last 5 years. So as you can see, we have communities that we haven't worked with yet. So this is an opportunity to really engage with like the village of Voorheesville and Castleton and Hudson, and work with communities we haven't worked with in a while. The next programming option looks at new sponsor projects, just new sponsor projects and the highest scores. So this is the town of Milton, Castleton, Hudson, Voorheesville, Albany County, city of Troy, and the town of Rotterdam. And then the third programming option aside funds only based on the project score. So this is just looking at the highest scored projects. So we have Albany County, city of Troy, town of Milton, town of Rotterdam, and the town of Clifton Park. And that is the last program option. But I think that there is one more slide that kind of gives up.
I don't know, that was all that was there, Jen. So I'll jump in because I feel like your voice is going.
No, sorry.
That's okay. So to recap, we have 3 programming options and they're shown here in the table just so you can see them on display. As Jen mentioned, you know, when we look at the range of applicants, there were 3 that are new to CDTC that staff had as priorities in 2 of the 3 options. The city of Troy's project, we had it not included in the option 1 because it had received funding three of the last 5 years. They've gotten this kind of funding and we wanted to spread the wealth to others. Option 2 considers the town of Colony's project, or option 1, it considers the town of Colony project in place of Troy's. The town of Colony project, while a higher cost one, gets to the Route 5 corridor, which Ross kind of talked about a little earlier, and some of the desires of the town to look at that full corridor between more or less New Carner Road out to the Niskayuna side of the community. Whereas option 2, again, prioritizes the communities we have not worked with before, and option 3 goes straight down the list. The funding, the total funding that you're seeing here, you know, our good target that we're at, where we are at internally here right now, is about $500,000. So we can fund any one of these 3 options. I feel pretty confident that we'll be able to handle that. So, you know, it's really up to the committee, which of the 3 options you would prefer. You know, I think staff priority would be option 1. Simply because it introduces the new sponsors, gets us colony and it does, and all three of these options do have geographic balance. We'd be funding work in all of the counties. Depending on which option you chose, which is the other reason why you're seeing Troy in option 2. So put that out there to the committee. I think staff's recommendation is option 1, but if you want a variation of that or you want further discussion, we're here to discuss that right now.
Out of the total that was available, it got down to 462,000.
Yep.
And then are you taking out of that the 49,000 referenced and the 10,000 referenced?
Yeah, so that 500,000 I just mentioned verbally.
It's really 403.
It includes 29,000 for the Complete Streets project that we have to fund. So it's a little squishy. It's a nice budget word. Because, we're still paying bills through the end of March. So some of the consultant bills that have yet to be paid are going to get paid in the next month. So we'll have a little more PL funding for these projects. That's why I feel safe programming any one of these 3 options at the levels you're seeing.
And you had said that in that option 1, noting that they were sponsors that hadn't had the use of these funds before or within 5 years' time?
Correct. So the top 3, Milton, Castleton-on-Hudson, and Voorheesville, we've never worked with a linkage. They've never been awarded a linkage program project before. Albany County, we haven't worked with since the very beginning of the program as a county. And then you can see Rotterdam, we worked with last in 2011, and then Colony, we worked with in 2018.
But looking at the host of names there, you don't see any problems with them at all as far as saying linkage or anything that would qualify our linkage plan. I don't want to say they're easier than some other plans or whatever, and they're guided a lot through the whole thing.
Most of these projects fell in the realm of sort of complete streets and pedestrian study. There are a lot of common themes in most of these projects. The one you're seeing here, Castleton-on-Hudson, would qualify for the complete streets funding, as would, we believe, even you could probably fund Colony with that special set aside of funds that we now have access to. But I think most of these projects are looking at mobility options, multimodalism, and complete streets.
There were not a lot of EJ points here. But there probably were not a lot of conditions that.
The EJ points, and I guess I can bring that up on a different spreadsheet that is included in the packet. We did assign EJ points to the projects, and let's see, pull this up quickly. Really wish I had better eyes for this. Can I clear this somehow? Anybody know?
Well, let me just do this without even having to look at it, because I know everybody's diligently reviewed the criteria and stuff. And because I have another question on what another one, the category meant about, it was like creativity or something like that.
Innovation.
Yep. Okay. That's just a question mark as to what that meant in this process. This is sort of, in one way, I looked at the EJ as a reflection of what I've said before, is that those EJ points come up in places that are more urbanized. And a lot of these that you said, there's some of them that are, particularly I noticed in town of Milton for us, that's the suburban area with not a high concentration in that area for bike use. And it's.
Yeah, so the more updated EJ map that was adopted at our last meeting was what we used for this. And I believe, and I think Sandy will get to it in the table, that Milton did have an EJ area.
There were three rural areas. I believe they were all in Saratoga County that, using the new criteria, they actually did get points for EJ.
Yeah.
And then if we use the one I
I
had.
think the
been
most
adopted,
was only 1 point. Somebody had 5 points in there, and I can't remember which one it was without the screen in front of me.
Right, so on the screen now, and I apologize, I can't manipulate this very easily to see it all in one screen, but you'll see this column is the environmental justice scores. I'll try to,
And it was 0 or 4. correct?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, for
okay.
each day it was either in or out.
so you can see most of them actually got points for EJ, ones that didn't, Castleton did not. Saratoga's. 19
That's out of the
project.
lake.
Around the lake, yeah. But most of them actually did get points. I would say more got points than didn't get points for EJ.
Castleton has to be an EJ map.
Unless I may be reading this wrong. I'm gonna look.
That would be. Andrew and I live around the corner. There's no way it's not.
You know,
Castleton did not get points.
that might avoid it by this much.
Yeah, it's probably because I don't know the demographics personally of that community, but it's based on a ratio of proportion of how much low income folks you have and minority population.
Yeah.
So if it's not a low income community or it doesn't have a high proportion of minority.
And how much, actually answered.
Well, that's
for the census.
that was gonna be one of my questions on
Census.
well,
Accuracy.
census, but staff. So the two villages, do they have staff to then implement these funds are coming in, or is the county doing it, or?
They do. Castleton for sure does. Voorheesville, we actually had a lot of contact with Voorheesville recently, so we do believe there's capacity to handle that.
And the cash match component has been legislated through these municipalities that have yet to do it. Okay.
All agreed.
All right, so it looks like Milton, Albany County and Rotterdam make all three scenarios.
Correct.
And so. And it's Castleton, Voorheesville make the first two. I'm just trying to, ones that drop out, is there, Andrew, did you have any, you want to make any compelling argument for Troy?
Well, I'd love to, but at the same tone, in fairness, we have taken advantage of linkage studies aggressively over the past few years, and we'll share.
Can I come back to that? Because when I started looking at the options, and I'm gonna say, are we knocking off some communities that just because they are efficient or good or capable, that we just don't consider them? Now, is that a right criteria?
Well, I mean, I think with limited resources, we do have to think about, how we can
And
spread this
that's the
around.
options. And I'm not saying yes or no, I'm throwing a
Right.
question out for discussion. Is that a criteria? We just say, hey, damn, you've been good, but you don't get anything this time.
I've made reference to this in other discussions of how we bring more municipalities to the table and provide inclusion. Obviously, you have the ability to argue your point and with decent backup. But at the same time, the smaller municipalities that may finally have an opportunity to participate and with a value, an ultimate value that we've received in the studies that we've participated in recently. I don't want to deny them their opportunity, especially since it's coming few and far between.
Right. That goes back when I first started talking and saying, are you satisfied with being able to work with these as communities if they haven't been here in time?
Yeah, and I think the benefit of this mix of proposals is, one of the critiques of CDTC when I took over is we weren't doing enough in smaller communities. And getting these two village projects funded would help support us reaching communities that we haven't, particularly ones that don't get a lot of opportunities, so.
What's innovation?
I will describe that.
Sorry, I apologize also for my word. Basically, we look at, is the sponsor proposing a project that incorporates either a strategy, a technology, or something that hasn't been used or demonstrated in the region before? Or are they approaching the project in a creative way, maybe partnering with, you know, an organization or someone that isn't physically involved in the process.
Okay. Some of these are really cut and dry. They just lack, they're just, you know, make the connection.
Right.
Okay. And they weren't high point things anyhow. You know, so you're not gonna, if you're gonna lose anything, you're not gonna lose it there, you know?
Right.
Okay.
We tried to make the evaluation criteria simple. So that, you know, anybody who received points for something like innovation, it had to be something very like, wow,
Something
this
stood
is,
out.
this is some, this is a standout project for this
Okay.
criteria.
I was looking at the Saratoga Lake project. I said, if you needed innovation, that's the one to try to get any kind of pedestrian around on the north side of that.
That's a tricky one.
Yeah, it is. Like,
And we're ready to make a motion to accept option one.
Option one.
I
We have a
second.
motion, second,
Mhm.
after all that.
I was happy. I was not anti anything, so just, you know,
You just want to extend the meeting.
who'd you vote for president?
We have a motion, we have a second, any further discussion, accepting staff recommendation, option one, the program. UPWP, right? We have a motion, we have a second, are you ready to vote? Those in favor, aye. Anyone opposed? Staying? We're good, all right, motion carried.
And if I can just add, because all of the proposals were, you know, they were very well
Yeah, they
done
were all,
together. They all
Yeah.
met new vision principles. You know, it really, everyone touched on things like complete streets, multimodalism, connectivity, accessibility, so.
My only thing, standing in the back of my mind is we had problems a number of years ago with the town of Milton. Completion of something or bringing something to fruition that this, and we sat around and proved something once, I don't even remember. It was,
Yeah.
it had to be 10, 12 years ago.
right, I mean,
You know,
things have
just-
changed there and I know.
That was that's my underlying point.
Right.
Things have changed.
And, you know, we try as best we can. I mean, there's history that happens in every community with changes of administration and other situations changes, even at the staff level, staff changes. So, you know, we don't want to look, you know, we certainly take that into consideration because we know we've had communities in the past that have had, you know, some unfortunate circumstances due to that leadership at the time, but then things change and, you know, they can progress things, but they weren't able to progress.
I'm reading through it, I'm going, Ryan's got a proposal in there, in Wilton. And his description was linking it to a linkage study that just, we've improved, got done, and it has not seen the light of the dust. You know, or through the dust that sits on top of it, you know,
Yep,
but
okay,
All right, we're good,
we're good on that topic.
moving on to the draft UPWP
Great.
document.
So I will take the ball from here because the action you just took will feed into Unified Planning Work Program.
yeah.
So we're at that time of year where obviously we're preparing our work plan for next year. And as a reminder, you know, this document contains all of the staff consultant planning work that's federally funded in the region, describes who's performing the work, so the schedules, the costs, and all the fund sources. It's all federally required documents, so this is one of these exercises that we have to do. But we also include in this document other planning activities that are funded through all of our funding. So we have some local funding, we have other federal funds, some state funds. So there's other fund sources that are identified projects in there. So we just talked about the solicitation release back in October. In December, NISDOT issued the UPWP guidance and funding estimates. This little table shows the PL funds for 2022-23 versus this year, or the upcoming year, 23-24, so relatively the same. This PL set aside was a new piece. You know, we are now, it's kind of additional money if you look at it that way. So we get an additional $48,000 in 23 to fund a complete streets oriented project. And then our FTA planning funds also went up a little bit. So we have a total of about a little over there's actually another slide that has a grand total on it. But the big new thing that you probably heard in the news yesterday was the Safe Streets for All grant. And the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program is a program that several entities within the region applied for, including us here at CDTC. The announcement was made yesterday that we were awarded a $1.1 million federal grant to pursue Vision Zero safety planning in the region. We'll be partnering with the city of Albany, Green Island, DOT is contributing, Saratoga Springs, Troy, and Waterville. Those are the folks submitting that have committed to providing the local share for this project. We're really excited. This is a big opportunity for the region, because even if you're not a funding partner, we're going to have a regional look at our crash data, develop some Vision Zero safety strategies, change and transform our local road safety plan into a regional Vision Zero plan, and then do some targeted work in the communities that have committed to the local share. There'll be a lot of public outreach, data analysis, and hopefully we can develop some strategies that can lead us down the path, which I think we've talked about in this room before, of setting folks up to access other grant funding to implement those projects. So we're very excited about this opportunity. We'll have more information coming. I know, Nicole, you're gonna be in touch with us at some point, or your office.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure out who the division office point of contact will be, but it might be me, it might be someone else, but I'll keep you informed once we figure that out. I'm having a discussion later today.
No, that's great. Thank you. So we're excited, but this is definitely going to be a big effort for CDTC over the next, I would say, at least 2 years. And we'll have more on that in the coming days. So as you can see from the time the mail out for the e-packet went to today, we already adjusted our UPWP. So it is a living document until it's not, right? So, but this is a great opportunity for us. So we'll be incorporating that into the draft before it hits the streets for review, public review. Ross, did you have a question?
Yeah, just back to the local share. How did you, I'm always interested in this because this always makes any grant that you go after that's a partnership where the local share is shared, end up being more attractive. So I'm just wondering, how did you come up with those numbers, and is the amount of work that's being done proportional to the amount of local share? That's just basically who could contribute what?
Yeah, so it just so happened that there were several entities that originally applied for these funds, and we were contacted by the Federal Highway Administration saying, hey, we got all of these applications, let's join them together into one, have you guys be the lead, you know how to manage federal grants. So we took the shares from all of us, but I think what this points to is how safety is a top priority throughout the region, and looking at these dollar figures that folks were committing to this local share, it just shows you the importance of safety. It's, in my communications and meetings with the lead elected officials of the communities in the region, this topic came up in every single one of them. So we know that this is a super important issue, but we're hoping that, we'll definitely be doing some targeted work in these communities because of their interests. But, even if you're not on this list, the region as a whole is going to benefit from this work.
I guess that was gonna be my question, is from I don't even want a PR standpoint, if that's such a thing. We saw this grant, this was one of the alphabet soup of grant lists that was out there. And I said, we're not doing anything new. We've got too much on our plate because it's me and one person doing all this. But now in this regard, it looks like the city of Schenectady doesn't care about Vision Zero safety planning because we're not on the list. And now I'm like,
That's
oh,
Andrew was actually.
Is that your comment?
yeah. No, it's not my comment. Yeah.
Because you didn't apply, is that it? Is this, all of those entities applied?
They
Is that how you
made
contacted?
separate applications.
Nobody contacted, like, say, the city of Schenectady.
Right, so it was only after the formal applications were submitted to the Federal Highway Administration where we contacted that, and it was on their, would you like to describe that process a little bit, if you know anything
Well,
about it?
that was probably
The
run
main
through
office.
OSC, their main office,
Yeah.
but, yeah, they really tried to emphasize, doing joint applications whenever possible. So I do know in some cases they did say like, hey, we don't want to be repetitive or hand out like funds just like piecemeal. We want it to be a regional vision for safety. So in some cases, in this case, yes, they did reach out and say, we want to, can you just join all these applications and cover the region? I will say that it's come up with questions in other areas. If the safety action plan that gets put together covers your area and there's strategies and projects in that plan that are applicable in your area, you can use that plan to then apply for implementation grants later. So
That I understand. What I just wanted, if the city of Schenectady has to pay $1,500 to make sure that at some event, the mayor of Albany, Saratoga, and Troy I gotta have my mayor there, or it's not gonna be a great look for us. That's all I'm getting at. So if this is just a planning thing and they're not involved, great, but if they're all kind of a group, you know, they talk and they do things together, and if he's not there, I'm gonna get a question of what the heck is this? And I don't want to make sure I can answer it. I kind of wasn't aware of what we were doing.
Save streets and roads for all.
Yeah, but that's.
Except Schenectady. So the reason I bring this up is more of, there's gonna be tons and tons of other raises out there. People are applying for raise, and Joe sent the letter requesting a letter of support. I know that Cohoes is going after, raise. We're gonna go after a project too. I'm just wondering if there's any way with this thing, because it's exactly what we did, right? We were like, should we go after this one capacity wise? Oh, it's another grant. Like, let's not go after this one. Obviously, if we had known prior that there was a local sort of consortium, like CDTA also would have contributed to it. So I'm just wondering in the future, is there any way we can set it up through CDTC where at least everybody just knows
Right.
what everyone else is doing? So at least if we're gonna compete, we're gonna compete, but if there's a way for everyone to overlap and everybody.
So one of the things that we have an administrative and finance committee meeting that in 2 weeks, next week, 2 weeks. Which is the arm of our policy board that kind of makes administrative and financial decisions for CDTC. And I'm bringing this issue to them on two fronts. One, we've never had this level of competitive grant requests and opportunities before. And in the past, and Rosh knows from the view of CDTA, the FTA side has kind of always been this approach, or at least in recent years, it's been this approach where they have to apply for funding, but CDTA has no competition in our region. So it's easy for me as director to write a letter of support for Ross, because I know it's not competing, but now we're getting into a situation where we have a DOT competing against a Cohoes, competing against a county, and the policy board is going to have to set some policy. To your point, how do we coordinate this at a regional level so that we're not competing against each other? What is the role of the policy board and the chair in particular in signing letters of support and these kinds of things? And it's really, we'll be discussing this at the policy level. It's a really important question and a really important issue that I'd like them to take a stand on and develop a policy for how this gets coordinated, because you're right. Now we're in a situation where multiple entities are applying for this. And in a home rule state as strong as New York State is, we're not used to working together. But I think what this announcement shows is why it's important to work together. So, I think we've learned something from this. If we ever have certainly a CDTC opportunity to apply on behalf, we can approach it differently. And even if we're not an eligible applicant, it's not something we can go after. You folks are working together to consolidate into a single application, something that has some regional impact. I think it's going to be much stronger at the federal level. And Nicole, you would agree?
And I think every grant is different. What they look at is different, but generally they look more favorably on grants that have that regional support and regional coordination as well. So that's something that makes an application more competitive. I think that, it's, we're kind of learning on the federal side too, but this new infrastructure bill really emphasizes this like new stream of discretionary grants. And there's going to be a lot more rolling out. The next round of Safe Streets for All is going to open up in April. there's a lot happening and a lot more grants are gonna be coming out. And I think they're really trying to make sure that they're making these opportunities available for direct recipients for municipalities, for counties, for non-traditional recipients of federal funds for direct funding. So yeah, just anything that you can do at the MPO level, I think that will make it easier for everyone to also meet the requirements of the grant agreement, because there's going to be a lot of requirements that direct recipients are not used to with the federal money. So I think it'll make the process of awarding the grant easier, and it'll make the process of applying and making itself more competitive.
Is it, is this money in revenue stream now?
So this is all new money. If you're talking about the local shares, this is what they committed to on paper. But this, we will have to work with Nicole's office to set up a whole new grant agreement for these funds.
Yeah, and
But they're federal fiscal year, current federal fiscal year. So 4 months of the year are passed.
So we will obligate this in the next UPWP.
Yeah.
Because it's fiscal year 22 money, but because of the lag. And this is what I know Federal Highway is still working on. This is all, and they admitted, when I got the email with the announcement from the headquarters office, they said, this is all new to us, so we're gonna be.
And from what I understand, because there were over 500 awards announced nationally, so and it's a lot of money. So it's like almost $1 billion with going to over 500 different recipients. So they're going to be releasing the grant agreement in batches as their ideas. What last I heard, this might have changed, but there's going to be 3 batches, and they're going to try and do a third of the awardees in the first batch, a third in the second, and then a third in the last batch. I don't know how they're going to order those, but they're trying to do this new, like, accelerated way of doing grant agreements, because it can take a very long time, as we're seeing with the raise grants that we're working with in our office. So they're hoping to streamline this and make it very quick. But like, they're kind of all figuring it out, we're figuring it out, so hopefully we'll get moving on it as fast as we can, but I personally can't speak to how quickly we'll get to that grant agreement execution.
Now, to your question about what I'll term the appearance part, if any sponsor or any community that is not a formal part of this, I mean, this is what we needed to provide to Federal Highway to access these funds. But if your community is, hey, we really want to get in on this, we can talk after the meeting and see if your community is interested in financially contributing. That's great, because more is better. We can, as I said, this is going to have a regional reach. We'll obviously be doing a little more work in the communities that have committed some match, but it's going to benefit the region as a whole. We can talk about that.
And the application process had, the lead applicant, the joint applicants who were providing local share, and then there were also partners, folks who maybe like universities who wanted to be a part of it, but couldn't necessarily be an applicant. So there's that. I'm not sure how you do it after the fact, but there is that like partner level as well.
And even if we did it through sort of just our work plan here and just built even more into the, added to the grant beyond what's the formal, project for Federal Highway, we can do that too. We have options.
I mean, could other communities be partners without dollar?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely ways we can, have the region. And I think that's the thing to remember. Our policy board represents us all, right? So even though it's not, when your mayor is sitting here or your lead elected official is sitting here as a member of CDTC, this is going to everybody. It's just that in the case of the 3 or 4 or 5 communities beyond DOT that contributed some local share, they just had some specific ideas of what they wanted to do in their communities. But the bigger picture, the efficiency here is the regional look at the crash data, regional strategies, and then we can drill down into these communities to do some of the targeted outreach or get into particular issues and use those as sort of examples for other communities to emulate, right? Because we're talking about, broadening our look at how we think about safety beyond just hotspots and where crashes are happening now. We're looking at systemic approaches, right? Looking at roadway characteristics that can contribute toward the risk of a crash. These kinds of things. A lot of communities are interested in pedestrian and bicycle safety, things that we're not seeing on crash reports. So, this is an opportunity to look at this much more holistically. And with this level of funding, I think we can do a lot. Even if we're not necessarily in your community doing it, but by virtue of, the members being a part of CDTC, it's going to benefit everybody.
This slide right here, will this be at the next policy meeting?
I don't have to put it in like that, if that's gonna be.
I'm asking Chris's question without him asking it. Okay.
We can portray it, I can word it in a different way, how about that?
Sandy, is this unique because the MPO can actually apply for it? It seems like
Yeah,
most
there's
grants, the MPO can't.
not a lot of programs in the past, pre-bipartisan infrastructure law that we as an MPO could apply for. The last time we had that opportunity is when we got the funding to do the 787 planning study through a federal program. So this bipartisan infrastructure law does open up eligibility for us to be an applicant for more things than we've had in the past, particularly on the planning side. Obviously we can't apply for construction funding, but for anything planning related, we can definitely be a lead.
All right, so you're looking for a motion.
Well, actually, that was just one piece of the puzzle. Sorry, so I'll go through the rest of this quickly, because you have the documents. It is going to be available for public review after you guys take action, so I won't go through the details, but we did piece this together using a variety of sources. I did want to give Stephen an opportunity to review the results of a survey we did at the point of the solicitation process. So Stephen, you want to walk through what we heard in public?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be quick as possible. Basically, we opened up a survey during the solicitation process to try to help kind of frame out what, where the public is. They're thinking about what the work that we do here at CDTC, how they feel about that, what their thoughts, their values, their priorities. So you can sort of see on this graph, kind of a ranking of how folks prioritize, the respondents prioritize their their values on like where investment should go. And I don't think it's, probably not a big surprise for folks that, expanding, complete streets was a big priority, transit, safety, and then, expanding road capacity for vehicles was the lowest priority. And the 53 respondents, almost all of them brought up like land use, denser development, walkability, bikeability, encouraging more active transportation infrastructure. And obviously transit was also central in their minds, expanding, not only access, but reliability and frequency, making it safer was also a huge priority. On the next slide, we just got into like a quick couple of sort of axes, I guess you could think of it, about how we would be thinking about what kind of planning projects we would be doing, sort of like looking at what the scope of a project would be and the scale of the project. Scope meaning, sort of like larger, more comprehensive efforts versus like kind of smaller efforts. And then in the geographic scale, thinking about focusing more of our activities on assisting local municipalities to accomplish their particular priorities, or doing more like regional focused kind of things. And I think you can see that basically, most of the respondents want some kind of balance. And at least in the scope, not much of a preference, but slightly favoring smaller, quicker efforts. But in the geographic scale, like I think maybe resonating with the previous conversation about the Safe Streets for All, finding ways that combine regional and local, but maybe with this slight, kind of preference for like understanding like a regional cooperation. So I think actually the Safe Streets for All program is almost exactly sort of fitting that mold. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Stephen. So, just in the interest of time, I mean, the big highlights, and I have several slides here, just kind of grouping the different tasks together, but the highlight reel really comes down to, in this category, we're going to be, obviously rebranding CDTC. We're going to build a new website. We're going to update a number of our operations documents. And we also are going to have some, we already talked about the equity planning work that we're going to be pursuing on our prior meetings. So that's the crux of this first group of tasks. This next group, sort of mainly related to data. So our data collection activities, we have a consultant on board that can collect traffic volume data and other on-street data. We can collect pedestrian data, we can collect bicycle data. So we have tools now and resources to actually do some data collection, and we can do that on request. So if there is something that you folks need, keep that in mind. We can probably help you out with that. The census is going to be a big piece of the program. Teresa will explain what's going on with the urban area boundaries. And we're sort of revamping our pavement condition inventory program in the sense that we're moving away from our staff going out and collecting this data. So we'll be closing some of these agreements we've had with local governments. With all of the other things going on, we just don't have the staff time to put people out in the street and drive around and collect that data anymore. So we're going to be revamping that. In this next grouping, the big task really is beginning the update of our regional transportation plan or our metropolitan transportation plan. So whatever this next generation plan is going to be, where we're going to rebrand New Visions. You won't hear us talking about New Visions in the future. We're going to rebrand it. We're going to completely revamp it, and it's going to be a multi-year process, but we're going to start that process this year. And we're also embarking on the update of our congestion management process that Andrew's taking the lead on. And we'll be wrapping that up sometime in the latter part of 2023, which we hope will help to identify some congestion management projects for the region. And the regional signal timing program is our local government effort to help with improving signal timing in some of our local communities. This next group, the rural, that safety program, that's going to be a big one. We have our ADA planning work in several municipalities this year. We're helping them to develop the ADA transition plans and do some data collection. We have Clean Cities, which is actually a US DOE funded program, but we're getting more money from US DOE. And this is really about, we can use these funds to help move transportation planning forward that reduces greenhouse gas emissions, carbon reduction. So we're going to leverage some of these Clean Cities funds to help with broadening our climate program here at CDTC.
Big EV charging stations, that sort of thing.
It won't fund the infrastructure, but it'll fund some of the planning for that. There's other TIP money, speaking of TIP. The NEVI program, which is the EV infrastructure funding program. I think that we might see some movement on that funding opportunity this year. I expect there to be a TAP CMAQ solicitation this year, possibly a PROTECT program solicitation, or at least some guidance from the department on what the PROTECT program is going to be. So there's going to be more work on the TIP is my bottom line on that. And the TIP project development support line that you're seeing there, that's how we're funding our staff time to assist with our planning and environmental linkage studies for 787 and the 378 bridge, possibly the 890 area of Schenectady, any others that might arise. We're going to be working on a number of TDM activities, and the TDM number is a little inflated because that's where I stash CDTA's local match, but we'll be doing a lot with CDTA this year on their bus lane, not bus lane, I'm sorry, the route restructure project, their transit development plan, their data plan. So they have a number of planning activities that will be involved with the CDTA. I already mentioned the Safe Streets for All grant. And then this final category, we have 4 linkage studies that will be carrying forward into the new UPWP that need to be completed. We just funded the 6 new ones. They'll be added into this. The shared transit service planning is a statewide initiative we're working with the MPOs on, which is a data-oriented activity to kind of test data tools for transit planning. And then we still support the town of Colony and the town of Malta by doing traffic reviews for their GEIS support. So that is the crux of what's in the UPWP. This detailed slide is really just to show the bottom line here, what our budget estimate is, with matched funds is about a little over $5 million for this year. So it's probably the most we've had in a number of years for planning, but you know, that Safe Streets for All grant really helps us to expand our scope as well as some of that USDOE money. So next steps is we already took the action on the project evaluations that will be added to the TIP, the UPWP. We'll just walk through the drafts. Your action today will be to approve the draft with the recommended projects that we just funded for public review. We'll open a 25-day public review period. We have mark your calendars for February 9th. I know you're going to be the first ones to join us for our virtual planning workshop, or public workshop for the UPWP. And we're also going to have try something new, given the UPWP is kind of hard to capture the attention of the general public. But we're going to try an open house here and try to have some folks maybe come to the office to learn about some of our planning activities of what we do. So we're going to try that approach on February 28th. The virtual workshop is February 9th, open house February 28th, and then at our policy board in March, they will take action to review and adopt the UPWP. So any questions?
Long list.
We got a lot going on, but it's exciting, and you know, I think we've got a very good staff here, and I know we can handle it. You know, and we know that a lot of you will be involved in a lot of this work, so we're really looking forward to the upcoming year.
Okay, now we're ready to go.
Now you're ready to
Ready to
go.
go? All right, then we're looking for a motion to approve the draft fiscal year 2023-24 UPWP with the new project we just approved. Can I get a motion to that? I'll do that. I get a second. Chris, any further discussion? We vote, all those in favor, aye? Aye. Anyone opposed, anyone abstain? Motion carries. We're on to what, US Route 4 over the Hudson River Raise Grant?
Yes, the raise grants. So we actually have 2 raise grant letters of support on the agenda. You know, this comes back to the conversation we just had where what is going to be the practice here at CDTC when these requests come, but I'll let Bob maybe talk about the DOT proposal.
Yeah, continuing our discussion of these discretionary programs and how they work. DOT as an entity statewide can only submit a couple of projects. So we were asked by our main office to come up with candidate projects that could be potential raise candidates, and ours was selected at least to go forward to put an application together. And we've started funding the preliminary engineering with state funds. You know, I don't know if you know the structure at all. US 4 over Hudson, it's bridges from Saratoga County into Washington County. It's a 3-span open grate truss that is continually, it's had several emergency repair contracts over years. What's nice about it in terms of the grant is that, I mean, there's a historic component, there's some resiliency element to it. It's technically Bike Route 9, but I think cyclists pretty hazardous to the open grade bridge there. There's while it lacks in some vehicular traffic, there is quite a bit of agricultural truck movement over that thing. So we think we're in a position to put a pretty good application together, and
a support letter from planning and the policy committee would go a long way to secure that grant. I mean, we're looking at about a $40 million construction cost there, and the alternative is to bring it to the table next program update.
Bob, is this the Northumberland Bridge?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We also have a safety concern, the intersection there at 32, there's also a crash history there, so it checks a lot of the boxes in terms, and even the components of the rural nature of the raise application, so.
Yeah.
We're looking for the body support.
What's
Are we
the,
taking these together or are we taking these individually?
probably one at a time.
Okay.
What's the grant you're requesting?
The 25 million. Is the
25
max
of the 40.
of the 40.
What's the scrap value?
A metal there.
Yeah, my goodness.
Interesting. Nobody's come to you looking for it.
The
The
scrap.
old bridge, yeah.
No, I mean, that certainly gets put into, I mean, there's such a value in that scrap metal there, that's included in the big element nowadays, say, how to do it, how it would be done, a design build or construct it in there, and that's another box of the thing that we talked about innovation earlier, some sort of construction technique, there's a dam downstream and there's so, yeah, whether you could float something.
I think if
there
you're
or not.
going over in Quaker Road up north,
Yeah,
you know, you bring that, there was a bridge brought in from 4 foot over there, and it's a bike trail road, you
yeah,
know. And I know we did before with the state, with the county. What's that, Dick's Bridge?
Dick's Bridge, we
Yeah,
did.
Dick's Bridge was done, went through, and that was a tip project, and I know we did fund it through IDA for something like that too. And it's a nice one, that carries, snowmobiles,
yeah.
equestrian.
Part of the trail system.
Yeah. All right, this will have capacity for bike usage.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'll make a motion to.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, since we're approving support letter. For US Route 4 over the Hudson River, the motion was Joe, second was that Andrew. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Abstain. So now we have a second letter.
Second right
for a
now.
second application.
City of Cohoes.
Stones thrown to the southeast of the first project we discussed. And to second Ross's point, I think, you know, if CDCC could provide more coordination on these grants, because we're all working in silos to a degree, and it'd be good to know before the process really started, but here we are. So Saratoga Street. We are looking, at first, we thought the project might be a little too small for the raise application, if you look at like historical funding trends. So we kind of built the project up and incorporated the entirety of Saratoga Street to get to that, you know, minimum $7 million ask threshold, $9.1 million project. The goals, you know, couple different goals here. So we want to do a complete streetscape restoration, mill and fill sidewalks from our city lines at Waterville to Waterford. Included in that, we have a culvert that hasn't been funded the past couple of years through the culvert New York process. We'd like to have that incorporated into this. Our engineer, he's been there 50 years and he keeps saying every year the thing's gonna go. So we'd like to start that process sooner than later. The whole stretch of this corridor is in majority LMI census tract, 64%. It's in a state designated EJ census tract. And it also houses our commercial corridor, our industrial corridor, and then in the center is housing. The industrial corridor you might be familiar with because Norlight's been in the news a lot. So that's kind of the section that we're talking about, focusing on the southern portion of Saratoga Street. Today we have, it's also a state designated brownfield opportunity area. We have 279,000 committed from Department of State for design. And ideally, before this application goes in, we'll have at least another 250 from National Grid for construction. We have, a lot of different areas we're looking for letters of support. And the idea here is, there's bigger projects that are going to be priority. We're just trying to make the case that there's enough money left at the bottom of the barrel to consider us and put in a strong application.
So a letter of support from this body would obviously go a long way, but given the other applications they're going in, I can understand if that doesn't happen, but just wanted to make the strongest case we could.
And just to clarify, the support letters come from chairman of the policy committee.
So these are both going to go to the policy board and our chair would be the signatory. So it is a little, I know this deadline is February 28th, but you have this action that, the letters for coming.
So we're recommending the policy for the.
They endorse it, yeah.
Are there others that have solicited?
Well, and coming back to what I was saying earlier, I mean, I'm aware of one other entity in the region that was considering a raise grant. And this is where the coordination gets tricky because timing, first of all, right, in terms of when our meetings are and when these deadlines are, sometimes those two things don't align very well with hosting for federal highway feedback. And then secondly, just getting the information because, you folks in this room probably would have the most knowledge of what your entity is considering applying for or not applying for. And we can certainly help coordinate that, but there's other things that happen in communities that, make a last minute decision to go for something, or, there's a whole myriad of.
But to date, you've only had 2 municipalities come to you looking for a letter of support.
For this round, yeah.
And that's CDTA is putting in, and I feel like we were probably going to come and look for a letter of support soon, so it is the timing of the meetings. Is after this meeting, right, because I can't insert an agenda item and have everybody vote on it. What we're looking to do is replace our Schenectady facility, our Schenectady division, which is the most outdated division, and Jeremy Smith can come in and give a full presentation as to what that, why we need to replace that division. My question, Sandy, is there any way for us from this date up until the application due date to get a letter of support, or do you need it to be?
No, I think this is why I'm bringing this to our admin and finance committee, because this is an issue that the policy board's gonna have to address somehow, and, whether that authority, gets subdelegated to the staff, meaning me, to, be the signatory so that we can get these letters out in a timely manner, or if we want the chair to be the signatory, how do we do this again and make sure that, we're doing it for one, that we're doing it for all, or we just want to be as fair as we can be, but this is where the policy folks are going to
Do we
delay.
really need our recommendation to the policy board, or can the policy board just?
We don't need it. I mean, like, if you want to bring it, but the bigger question of, we can muddle through for this round, but moving forward, how are we going to address this as an entity? We'll have to-
Who reviews the raise grants? Who's the division? Is
They're all
that
federal highway, I believe, right?
Yeah, but it's not our division office though. It happens at headquarters and they usually pull a national team together to review them. But yeah, it won't happen at our office level. It happens at the national level.
Support all.
Well, that's what I was gonna, that's
Going forward.
No, and that's fine.
Unless the project is to,
We're happy to do that. But remember, I am not the SPO is our policy board, and that's why we need to make sure that they're comfortable with that. So if the policy board acts and says, yeah, we're good, have the executive director sign all these support letters, great. That's all I need to have them endorse, but we have to take that
But
action.
the group could say, we will
Recommend that.
support,
Well, that
yeah,
could be
we
a motion
recommend that they
on the floor right
support.
now.
Well, it's motion, I put forth a motion then for consideration that should an applicant that meets the criteria of the grant request a letter of recommendation from CDTC, that it is summarily granted by meeting the requirements of the grant. And that way, you're not looking at individual projects or their merit to provide that letter. It just, you check the box, it meets it, CDTC provides it. That way.
Which ones delegate that to Sandy?
Yeah, that's the thing.
We're gonna stay-
At the discretion of the executive
So
director.
we're
It doesn't need to go to
recommending,
policy, right?
so you're recommending to the policy board to take that action.
Yes,
Or to do that, yeah, that's really your discretion.
I
That's
will
the recommendation
second
I'd like to make.
So we have a motion and a second.
The only question I would have is in the history of this board where you've been here, Sandy, has there been a project that has, I haven't seen it, but where City of Troy wants to do a project that affects Rensselaer County and they are like, your projects, I'm not gonna like your, I don't know
Yeah.
if that'll come up, whereas how did they get a letter of support? Because I don't support that because I've never seen it.
And that's
but
why
it
it's-
probably has happened.
Right, and that's why it's important our policy board weighs in on this,
Yeah.
because that scenario could play out. I can't think of a recent situation where that's happened, but Bob, you have more statewide experience, it's probably happened.
Well, the discretion of the executive director to provide that would exist. So if a conflict potentially exists, Sandy would be able to reach out to those municipalities independently of the board voting.
And it gets complicated, right? Because not all of these grants are created equal. You said the planning grant, the previous one was much not as comprehensive as these raised grants are, and the level of analysis that's involved. I mean, DOT purposely used state funds to get a consultant on board to help with this, to develop of the application. It's not the same as even the Bridge New York or a TAP CMAQ application. It's a whole different animal.
Data driven.
Very data driven.
How long did the consultant work on the application? And how, because we just found out about the raised grants in December. So did you immediately get a consultant on board and is it taking them like 2 months?
Well, we had particularly funded preliminary engineering with them, knowing that this may come up. We didn't know if it was going to be the raise grant or some other opportunity will come up. And this goes to our earlier, even the program update of encouraging some of the 1 through 4 funding it, as opposed to, it's construction or nothing. It's a discussion, because if this is, our friends at Federal Highway or USDOT have made it a discretionary driven program, you need to have some of this preliminary stuff done, or it's not going to be competitive. So, I mean, to your question, it's a good 5 full staff weeks, right? 2 people of doing that.
Yeah, okay, because that helps, because we were considering it and we didn't know if a month would be enough for a consultant to pull something together for it. So for our project, we would think we'd take it down the road and do maybe testing that versus the raise, because it's something that's more doable.
There's also on the USDOT website, it lists all the upcoming grants that are like roughly when the NOFOs will be released, so for planning purposes. So I know this spring will be the first time we open up the Protect discretionary grant, which is, it goes alongside the formula program. So it's like a resiliency based one. But so the Protect discretionary grant will be coming out this spring. The next round of the rural infra mega grants will be coming out, and then the bridge investment program. So that can help with planning purposes as well. Just kind of seeing, okay, this will be coming out in the next 3 or 4 months. So, and it might be one we want to.
And just as a reminder, we have all of that linked right off the homepage of our website. To go to the bipartisan infrastructure law funding tab, you'll see all the guidance and support. The upcoming, the upcoming NOFOs. This has the calendar that Nicole is referring to. So I know this new way of delivering the federal program for non-core funds is still, like we were talking about earlier, a learning process. I don't know what feedback they're getting. They may be getting feedback, well, boy, this is just way too much work. I don't know. But, it's definitely, what we can do for at least the planning committee agendas is maybe have this, put the link right on the agenda for you folks, so that at least it gets you to think, maybe click in there and just see if anything's come out recently, because I know many of you sign up probably for the USDOT emails and there's a lot of communications, but I mean, if it helps you, if we just throw that on the agenda with the emails for the planning committee material, we'd be happy to do that, but.
So where are we? We have a motion from Andrew.
Second, right?
So just to articulate the motion, it was to, should a letter of support be requested by an entity for a federal grant. Delegate to the executive director at their discretion, to write the letter.
Provided,
All federal grant.
Provided it's now-
provided it meets the criteria.
So that's the motion.
That's the motion.
Second, Ross. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye? One opposed? Staying? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Now we're on discussion items. Is that where we're at?
We are, we did, Carrie, just confirming, did we vote on the raise grant for host?
That's what I just, so.
We did not, right?
Effectively, we kind of just did.
We kind of just did, right?
Yeah, wrap that in. That will
Wrap
wrap
that
it
in.
in, yeah.
But if that,
But that would
if
be,
that doesn't get passed, then we should have.
We
the
should take
approval
an action
independently.
on his letter right now, just for the
so you want
formality.
independent motion.
Yeah.
To recommend to the policy board that they letter of support is provided for the raise grant for Cahoe.
So move.
Second.
Okay,
All in favor?
Aye?
okay.
Opposed? Same, so we're good. We're
This is
covered.
all part of our operating procedures that are currently being updated. All right, great. Yes, so now we're on discussion items. I know it's getting late, so I'll try to zip.
Carbon reduction, right?
So, yes, so the carbon reduction program, we've kind of talked about generally, but we had this only on for discussion because we just wanted to give you folks an opportunity to digest the options. So this carbon program funding, obviously, this is a new fund source that came out of the infrastructure law, and it is as exactly as it sounds. It's to fund projects that reduce carbon dioxide emissions from transportation sources. And we, as an NPO, have been allocated roughly just over $1 million a year of funding in this program for a total of $5 million for what we call our Albany Schenectady urbanized area. And this funding is assigned to the NPO based on the urbanized area population. And then our Saratoga Springs area received just under $112,000 a year. So in theory, the allocation is about 5.7 million over the 5-year period of the current infrastructure law. Right now, we have available to program because it's been officially allocated by the department to us to program about 2 years, the first 2 years of funding, so 2.2, almost $2.3 million of that. So the question on the table was, how do we want to use this money? The eligible project list is lengthy. It's what you would expect. It's a lot of electrification projects, congestion mitigation projects, bike and ped projects, things that are consistent with the transportation alternatives program. There's some travel demand management programs, transit, heavy on the transit side. So there's a lot of the things you would expect to see as eligible activities. So we had two options that we wanted to have you guys think about, and then we can take a future action at another meeting on what we want to actually do with these funds. The first option is we create a new set aside of funding for the carbon reduction program. Why a set aside might work is twofold. One of the requirements for these funds for the state of New York and all the states is they have to develop a statewide carbon reduction strategy by the end of 2023. So that document is in process right now. Once that document is adopted, the kind of priorities in that project, in that plan will guide how we can use this money here in New York State. I don't think we'll be surprised by what's likely to be in it. In the short term, though, we could add these funds as a set aside and fund some projects that typically don't compete well for core funds. So some of our technology oriented projects, our signal projects, Andrew put together some examples here from other NPOs that are not huge dollar values, but are things that we could fund as a result of the completion of the congestion management process document at the end of this year. So putting the funding in a regional set aside is one option. The other option is, and some NPOs in the state are doing this, where they're actually swapping funds for existing projects, meaning they're taking the carbon fund source and swapping it out on projects for which the project is eligible, but currently is using other funding like the Service Transportation Program funds or the NHPP funds. So we looked at our existing TIP and kind of thought about what projects would fit the spirit of what the carbon program would do. The BRT work that CDTA does is an obvious fit. That could be the Albany urban area swap, and that would free up STP flex for other uses. The other option, or the second piece of that, would be maybe if not the BRT project, maybe we pick specific projects, and we gave two examples. One's in town of Clifton Park's bike ped project, and the other one is in Schenectady, another sort of pedestrian oriented project. So that's just one approach for the Albany urbanized areas share, and then for the Saratoga Springs urbanized area share, we just don't have as many projects up there.
Sorry to interject, but do you think you could share the screen so that people online could see?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. So the Saratoga Springs urbanized area would be, what we think would be a good fit would be the design of the Census trail and swapping out the funds there. But the spirit of that option is simply to assign those carbon funds to projects and then use the STP funding on other things.
You'd solicit that for other projects? Or we would just,
In this scenario, no, we would not be soliciting. We would just be taking the 2 years that have been allocated
what
to us.
money you free up?
Yeah.
What do you?
We would put it in reserve for all of the cost overruns that we're already experiencing.
Can I add one more point for consideration of the carbon reduction program? So I think for these first couple years, since we don't have implementation guidance on Justice 40 yet, it's not as big of a concern, but this will be a program that's covered by the Justice 40 initiative, which means 40% of the funds need to be programmed, or the benefits need to be programmed in a way that they benefit disadvantaged communities.
Yeah.
Similar to EJ community. So just something to think about as you're thinking about what to do with these funds.
And we did consider that in these options, and we talk about this in the write-up, but the BRT implementation project, given the location of the BRT routes in the region, are pretty much in the Justice 40 areas, so that would qualify. The Clifton Park one does not. The Grand Boulevard project is right on the edge, so I think we could argue it's in the physical boundary.
The people in this unit can see Schenectady.
Yeah, exactly.
Does the funding
The
get?
Zenith
rolled over?
Trail obviously is not.
Yeah.
Does the funding get rolled over, or does it have an end date?
It's gonna be used similar to our regular fund
Okay, so it
sources.
could be,
Yeah,
okay, and.
which is
second-
why we think the set aside is an option to consider. I understand the benefit of the fund swap option. Because yeah, we are having cost overruns on other projects, and we can use those STP flex funds in particular anywhere. They're the most valuable fund source, but
And just for the identification of Albany, Schenectady urban area, Troy is excluded from that?
you're in that.
Oh, we are.
It just
Okay.
not, the label doesn't include you. It used to.
Used to, yeah.
Are we making an action on this?
No, this is just food for thought. We're just putting this out there for you guys to think about, because at some point we are gonna have to take an action on it. There's no urgency on this, but know that once that state plan is approved, whatever is in that state plan, we would have to, abide by in terms of priorities. So if they're prioritizing signal work over transit work, we would have to spend the money there, right? Or so, not knowing what it's gonna look like. It could be very broad, and it could be very consistent with all the things that we're talking about.
I think the key part for whenever we have to have the discussion is the swap, which obviously CDTA is gonna support, because either way we're funding the BRT set aside. I think we really need to discuss what we are using that freed up money for. And going back to, we were just talking about with the RAISE grant, where DOT and CDTA have done product development, some level of design, and have projects that are gonna be more attractive from some degree, hose, more attractive to RAISE. I just want to reinforce the need for us to set aside some amount of money to decide on regional projects, not just BRT, regional projects that we can fund project development, some level of design for, so that those projects can be more attractive for federal funding. And I just want to keep repeating the CDTA model and not to just take this money and throw it into reserve, but actually strategically use it to advance some other project, whatever that may be.
And with regard to Ross's comment, I think that's the set aside is the way to go with an application for use to identify a contingent or supplemental project that would benefit from the new funding created as a result of the use of the set aside. So that would get
I think where they're going with this is more that the meeting's already gone over, but the SDP flex money is more flexible. So whether we still create another set aside from the freed up SDP flex, that's a discussion. But the idea of this carbon money is very specific to certain things, and if they're very specific to CDTA, why not give CDTA that money for this? We're getting no new money for this, so I just want to be clear on when we're saying that. Whatever that frees up, though, if it's STP flex money, then we have tons and tons of different options of how to use that. It may be to set up a set aside, just
right,
not
but you're asking for a singular consideration because you're eligible for the carbon offset money, that the money freed up should be used by you as well.
No. He's saying as a
Not at all.
region.
This is for the
Yeah,
region.
okay, yeah.
There's actually no benefit to CDTA
Okay,
with this. It's
okay.
just,
This
you
goes
guys know
back
I'm a
to the
broken
discretionary,
record.
this goes back to the discretionary discussion again, being prepared for these, if this is the way.
Yeah.
And that is, it is a valid point because we talked at the table about having resources to support that prep work and what that looks like. So, that could be another discussion item that our policy board will have to weigh in on at some point.
All right,
All right, so
Go ahead.
thank you.
summary of 2022-2027 tip project selection moves. Jacobs?
So this month we had three tip project selection moves. The first one was Albany County, the Albany Shaker Road Corridor Enhancements Project. They requested to move out their preliminary design year from fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. Second one, Town of Malta, East Line Road, Route 67 roundabout. This one, we advanced preliminary design from 24 to 23. And then also split out some of the preliminary design funding into right-of-way incidentals. One note with this one is that this is a design-only project. Originally, the town had asked to use some of the extra design money and have right-of-way acquisition added. We cannot do that without having construction funded on the tip. So any of you all out there that have a design-only project, just kind of take note of that. We could really only add, the only real phases that we can have on those are preliminary design and then our right-of-way incidentals until construction funding, if that's identified through another process or another grant program, then we could break out into those other phases. So just wanted to note that. Third project, Village of Voorheesville sidewalk improvements. This was a TAP project that was added last year. They were using existing funding in design and construction to add a right-of-way incidental and a right-of-way acquisition phase. So again, all of these are kind of schedule adjustments, additional phases that are under 250,000. So we make these changes without amendments. Second piece to this real quick. If you go to the next slide, Sandy. You've heard us mention this a couple times. Between when our tip was approved in September and then when the new STIP was went live in December, we obviously continued moving forward, making amendments, making changes. What that meant was that, this January, we basically had to catch up the new STIP to all of those changes that we made to the old STIP. So just for transparency's sake, we listed all of those. There's about 25 changes that we had to make to the new STIP, but they were all approved either by amendment or project selection in the past actually, some of these changes go back all the way to August, where those weren't captured in the final kind of SIP release. Again, they were all either previous amendments or previous project selection changes that we've included here. But we've got a list of them shown here just for reference. That's it for project selection.
Any questions?
Yeah, just one question. Any major percentage change to the fiscal restraint as a result?
Oh.
Thank you.
Well, I guess the discussion that we had the first part of the meeting, that was partially due to some of those rollovers and changes that we had to, they were made kind of in limbo. But then we made those budget adjustments, so.
The table you saw earlier reflected.
Oh, right,
reflects
right.
all this.
It really wasn't any
It's a minor
new money
change, yeah.
to the new tip. It was new money that was added to the old tip that wasn't necessarily accounted for.
Gotcha.
But we made those changes, so.
Thank you.
I know that's clear. as
Yeah,
day.
yes, but no.
Yes, but no, right?
Thank you, Jacob. CDTC project delivery update.
Yep, still me. So as always, just a couple project milestones, City of Albany, Larch Street, Madison Avenue, Millenville. Draft design report was completed in December. City of Troy, Campbell Avenue over Winanskill Bridge repair, construction completed in December. Village of Scotia, Sunnyside Road Bridge replacement, preliminary design authorized in November. And then I think we have Caitlin Rietmeyer on the phone from Colony to discuss their Albany Shaker Road project, just kind of the latest update on that, some of the coordination that they have going on.
Hi, thank you. So when the more recent tip was announced, Albany County received funding for their Albany Shaker Road Corridor Enhancement Project. And a lot of the scope of work for that actually overlapped with what the town was looking to do and was approved for in the their tip project for the that same corridor and the same section of it. So the town and the county got together and had a discussion with respect to the scope of both projects and determined that there's going to be a reduction in the town's tip project just because some of the elements of the work were either not feasible because the town didn't have anything in their budget to do takings. And we found out during the preliminary design phase that some of the sidewalks, which was part of the scope of the work, were actually located in private right-of-way. And since that's not part of the scope, we eliminated that aspect. And other items were actually going to be essentially removed when the county actually performed the construction of their tip project, even though theirs is only just design. We didn't see any advantage to doing work that was going to potentially be destroyed in 5 years' time. That's not in our nature, not in the county's nature, I'm sure. So we didn't want to proceed with getting that funded. So the town's actually eliminating 3 of the 5 intersections from the tip project that we were doing. I believe that the preliminary design report was submitted to all of the entities by our design engineer. So yeah, that's basically the update. I'm fairly certain we're going to have to submit a scope change request, but that's definitely going to end up in a reduction of funds going towards the town for this project. So I know you've been talking a lot about transferring of money, and so that could help with some things. But so the 3 intersections are Everett, Osborne, and the crossings. So we will still be doing the Shaker L intersection and the Marie Parkway intersections. And that was focused on pedestrian access.
Very good. Any questions for Caitlin? Hearing none. Thank you, Caitlin. Appreciate the update.
Sure.
Okay. Robert, NISDOT project deliveries.
A couple quick things. The Route 7 over the Hoosick River, the back channel, the emergency replacement that should be completed in the next couple days. Paving in 20-degree weather. You wouldn't expect perfection, but it should be open within the next couple days. the Water Street over at DNH that we spoke about earlier, where the letting will be later this spring. We did receive 43 Culvert, New York applications, and that's about $15 million. Just roughly, that's about, 3 times the need versus the number of applications we got. So I will get an update. We've got a team together, comprises 5 of them from around the region, and we'll have an update on that next time.
What's the county percentages of submittal? Fairly equal.
You always ask me to tell you what. I could lie to you and tell you I knew right now. It's also kind of out of an abundance of caution that the pedestrian component of the Dunn Memorial had to be closed the other day. They're gonna make some structural repairs to that, but it does involve some pouring of some foundations and things. So it's gonna be a few weeks before that's open again. I can't enough compliments to CDTA and the folks over there. It's sort of innovative solution. There's stops on either end, and using the racks on the buses, that the accommodation of the bike and peds has been going, and that they've been flexible with the schedules and stuff. So thank you, kudos to there as an innovative, quick solution there.
Thank you. That is CDTC.
Just briefly, 2 things. One, we're at the time of year where we're seeking a town and village rep to replace Anna. Her term will be up here for the planning committee as the town and village rep. So if anyone has a particular interest in serving, let me know. I'll be reaching out to folks who are pretty active with us to see who would be interested in serving that role. The Rensselaer County folks, we're also seeking a town and village rep from the county of Rensselaer to replace Mark Surden, who will be dropping out. I've sent emails and, canvassed the county, but no one's responding. So if anybody knows anybody, any elected official, we're talking about town supervisor or village mayor who might be interested in serving on the CDTC policy board next year, let me know. I'll try to make some phone calls about that. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is our name change finalists. The feedback I received basically says throw out anything with capital district, capital region, and go with some variation of transportation planning council or transportation planning of the capital region. So these are sort of the finalists that our ANF and our policy board will make a decision on moving forward. I know one of those 4 I kind of like. We'll see what my personal, I'll just say it, my personal, I like Transportation Planning Council of the Capital Region, but we'll see what the ANF and the policy board show. So we could become the TCP or PC, I should say, moving forward. We'll see. And that'll be it, just in the interest of time.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. 2020 census urban boundaries.
Yeah, so we did want to bring to your attention.
Golf
Ready.
It's the TPC golf terms, TPC Sawgrass, TPC, yeah.
Right.
This is the team.
This is Schenectady's T or Capital Region's TPC is way different.
So I'll let Teresa describe what you're seeing, but the short version is the urban area boundaries that were designated by this US Census or the 2020 census were released. This is a messy map, but I'll let Teresa, you go ahead and explain
Okay, so
what you're
this
seeing.
is actually from Federal Highways online viewer, and what you're seeing on the left, the outlines show the 2020 census designated urban areas. There are some smaller ones that are a little lighter, but we're really looking at Albany, Schenectady, and Saratoga. So one of the things that changed with this census is that they changed kind of the way that they define them. So we have something kind of new that we didn't have before, which is kind of some discontiguous polygons. So that might be a little interesting going forward. But the last time around on the right, you'll see the outline of the 2020, and then the filled in polygons is what the census designated in 2000 or 2010. So basically, you can see there's some areas in the light orange shading in the Albany, Schenectady area, like there's a little arm on the western side that goes out to the village of Altamont. There's some area in south western Rensselaer County that was urban last time that is not, and we'll see the same thing a little bit out Schenectady County. And then a little bit same on the western side of Saratoga County. So basically, these are the census designated boundaries that are attached to things like funding for FDA and other transportation funding programs. And we can't really change those. That's what it is. We do have an opportunity. It's an optional exercise that we can take to kind of smooth or adjust the boundaries. We have done that in the last two census rounds. We've done that, and we will probably do that again. We can't decrease it. We can just kind of expand it. And in the past, what we've done is kind of added in the areas that have kind of been taken out, and it's really only for roadway functional classification. So it's to prevent having a roadway corridor, keep switching between urban and rural, and being maybe federal aid eligible, maybe not federal aid eligible. So hopefully we'll be able to add some area back in for those purposes. But yeah, there's just some really odd things like that big donut polygon to the left of the Albany Schenectady label there, and just some odd things. But pretty much our next steps are we wait until we get the guidance from Federal Highway, and then we'll work with DOT and do a review of what makes sense to bring back in as far as functional classification. And the schedule will also have to wait for Federal Highway on that, because as everything else with the census, the urban areas were delayed in being released, and they were just released at the end of December. So they're a good at least 6 months behind on that schedule.
So the important thing for us, aside from the physical boundaries, is the population numbers and how that affects our funding. As you can see, our entire metropolitan planning area, which is the first row in this spreadsheet, our population increased in the 10-year period by 1.8%. The Albany Schenectady urban area actually went down very, very slightly. The Saratoga Springs urbanized area is where we saw the growth. And I don't think that surprises anybody in the room. What this means, though, at a statewide level is New York City grew by 1 million people. If the rest of upstate stayed flat, and in some cases, some MPOs actually declined in their population, the funding will get allocated differently down the road. We don't know what the impact of that is going to be today, but given that tremendous growth in the city, I can expect our resources to start decreasing to some degree here. We'll have to wait and see what the impact of that is down the road. But the whole MPO process is urban driven. Urban area boundaries are what define the MPOs. It could have been worse for us because we didn't decline. But I know some MPOs in the state did decline. But we'll have to see what the impact of that is going to be moving forward. So I just wanted to point that out. Stay tuned.
Point of clarity, why did Troy get dropped from the urban area title?
Yeah, it actually happened in 2010, I think. Yes, but back in 2000, it was Albany Schenectady Troy. Yeah, there's little changes that have happened over the different 10-year increments, including name changes, or they've also dropped. Now it's just urban area. It used to be large urban area, small urban area, urban cluster. So if you saw Corinth on the slide and you're like, why is Corinth urban? It used to be an urban cluster. Now it's just urban. But all of those things come into play when you're looking at, the total money available and then what fund sources things qualify for. So yeah, I don't know why, and it's confusing because I think people get confused with the MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Areas, and that still is on Schenectady Troy, I believe. This is a very confusing program and just data set that I have been working on it since the 2000 census, and I can't answer all the questions.
Because it's advantageous, at least locally, to see the population delta for the individual in Albany, Schenectady, and Troy. the areas themselves. Thank you.
All right. Are we talking about the return on that?
The status of planning activities for the other entities is up to you guys if you want to go through that, or we can table that and put the bulk of the agenda is, we're good, we're good.
Got enough?
It's up to you folks.
Enough? Second. Favor aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
Thank you
Moving
guys.
on.
Hey, Mark.